Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Listen, I don't have a beard. I've got this glorious mustache. But even this stash deserves elite care. That's where Wicked Wolf Beard Co. comes into play. Their oils and balms keep the face fuzz fresh, soft, and ready for action. No crusty cowboy nonsense here. It smells great, feels great, and makes me look more like I lift heavy things. Beard, mustache, or something in between, Wicked Wolf's got your mug covered. Wicked Wolf Beard Co. Respect the stash. Head on over to Wicked Wolf Beard Co. and use code PLDEN for 25% off your order. Shout out to my guy Bear over at Summit Performance Therapy, the only person I trust to scrape me, needle me, and massage me, and fix my squat at the same time. If your joints sound like microwave popcorn, or you've been limping since Tuesday's deadlifts, Bear's your guy. He knows lifters, he is a lifter, and he's got magic hands, dry needles, and a deep understanding of how to not let your body fall apart. Book a session and tell him the PL Den sent you. Summit Performance Therapy. Reach your summit. Powered by Bear. Literally. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on a phenomenal female raw lifter, Naomi Sheppard, trains out of Elite in Ohio. Naomi, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Naomi. You probably guessed from my accent that I'm actually British, but I've been living in the US now for like a year and a half. I train out of Elite FTS as one of their athletes. And I've been competing now for like 12 years, I think it is. Yeah, 12 years. So it's been a long time. I've actually been a coach for longer than that. I started out as a strength and conditioning coach, coaching university sports teams while I was studying for my biochemistry degree. And I have like kind of done a big variety of coaching styles. So I started out as like pure strength and conditioning. I kind of specialized in research for a while, so I was like less coaching, but I was running a powerlifting team alongside my husband Tom at that point as well. And then I spent a few years doing like rehab related stuff. So I was working with a lot of patients post operation, ranging from like hip replacements to like cancer treatment. And then I spent just a few years like working in a gym, just like as a personal trainer, like running classes. Like, so I've worked with a big variety of people. The last few years I've done like a lot more online coaching. I guess like along with a lot of coaches, COVID kind of pushed me into that, especially in the UK. Our gyms were shut for over a year. So yeah, but it gave me the freedom to be able to travel a lot more, and it's allowed me, like my husband's the same thing. Like we've had like a very similar journey, but it allowed us to move over here. So yeah, it's been a good thing. But so now like I work with a really big variety of people. I work with a lot of powerlifters just because of my like I guess what I do in the sport. Like it kind of attracts people who like, oh, you know what you're doing. But yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, so I think kind of before we dive into your background a little bit, what kind of brought you to the U.S. and kind of how's it been since you've been here?
So actually, it was purely for competing because I started coming over in like 2021, 2022. In fact, my first competition over here was like 2018, but I started doing a lot more pro competitions like a couple of years after that. And like all the best competitions at that point were in the US. And I mean, all the best athletes are in the US as well. So like I wanted to be in like an environment that would challenge me more and be around people that were better than me. Um, yeah, and I basically we ended up moving here just because of my sponsorship through Elite FTS. So I actually was sponsored by the UK branch, and I did a podcast with Dave like a few years ago, and I also did one with Sam Brown at that point. And then like me and Tom started coming over, so like we did our first podcast together, like just roughly like 3 years ago, and then we just kind of like built a relationship with Dave from that point. And like we were coming over to help with events, and like we helped with the Swiss the 2 years that they ran it, and then so it was kind of like a bit of both. I guess it was mostly for powerlifting to compete, but that relationship that me and my husband Tom built with Dave Tate and Tracy Tate, helping with Elite FTS, like we wanted to kind of put a bit more educational stuff out there, and they've already got this like amazing platform, and you know they've been helping people for over 25 years, So yeah, we just really loved the ethos of the company. So it's kind of like I wanted to come over for competing anyway because that long haul travel like really takes it out of you, and
Oh,
I felt like
absolutely.
I was at a bit of a disadvantage. But then the other part of it was like for the for work, like as coaches, like we felt like could make a bigger difference, especially having Elite FTS as a platform. So yeah, it's kind of like multiple decisions, but
Yeah,
everything's bigger and better in the US.
and so obviously the level of competition here is uh, higher, but in terms of like the kind
Yeah.
of powerlifting culture between the two, what's some of the biggest differences you kind of noticed when you first came here, or just
Just
like
everything is bigger.
yeah,
Yeah, the competition is higher. Um, I feel like we're just always running a few years behind on everything in the UK. But like the scene in the UK now has blown up like so much more over the last years, and it's been really like great to see. But I just really love being in the US. I feel like it feels more like home to me. So yeah.
yeah. Then so we'll kind of dive back in your background. So I know you kind of um, missed out on sports as a kid from Sever's disease, and you kind of wanted to
Yeah.
get past that, and lifting was kind of your, I guess, outlet per se. So maybe tell us about that journey of kind of getting through that condition and kind of working into becoming a powerlifter.
Yeah, so I've spoke about it on a couple of other different podcasts, but just like to give a rough, like quick,
Yeah.
don't want to dive into it too much detail, but I essentially spent like my age from like 10 to 16 not walking because one or both my heel bones would be broken. That's just kind of a side effect of having Sever's disease. So I was like not even really walking, let alone like playing sports. So I missed out big time, like physically, in like probably the time where you really like discover what sports you're good at. Um, and then by the time I went to university at 18, I'd spent like my ages from 16 to 18 just catching up on academics. Like, even though I was still like studying and, doing schoolwork at home, it's not, it's not really the same. I will say it taught me how to teach myself better. But yeah, so by the time I went to university, I'd really missed out. And I'd also, I basically picked up lifting because I'd kind of done research on like what would improve my bone density because I'd seen, it's a genetic disorder. So I'd seen some of my uncles really struggle like later in life. And I didn't want that to happen to me. So I was like, what can I do to like improve bone density and like really improve my feet? And so like I'd basically discovered like lifting, if you load a bone end to end, like you can actually increase its bone density. As we know now, there's a lot more like research and studies and a lot more people doing it, especially in like older populations and the benefits it can have. So that's kind of why I started it, but I loved it.
Yeah.
And like just being in the weights room and like you get to see like you put hard work and you get to see that progress.
Yeah, and I think we
Yeah,
can actually kind of dive into a little bit behind the science of that because I'm a nerd myself, and I kind of like talking about that. And I think it's very interesting to talk about like the just how the bone density, like when you can create compressive forces on the bones, just how much more stable they can be, and like going into later ages, like how much muscle loss it can prevent. And like something I try to tell my grandma all the time, like it's never too late to
yeah,
start lifting weights. If you can put your body under compressive forces, you're going to be in less pain than you are now.
yeah, for sure. I feel like you're seeing so many more people now lifting weights in weights rooms. Like it's even in the last like 10 years. Sorry, it's one of my
Okay.
But even in the last like, 10, 12 years that I've been in the industry, it's like changed drastically. You see so many people, like such a big variety of people in the weight room now, and that's just like amazing because it's really great to see the growth and like the more understanding. Um, but yeah, I kind of picked up a few different sports along the way. Like I played rugby for a while, which is essentially like American football,
Yeah.
I suppose. And like I was already really strong at that point, so I think they just loved me because I was like really good at throwing the ball long distance, and like I was really good. Like my legs were super strong. I was never the fast runner though.
Yeah, and if you were kind of to
um,
look in hindsight, do you think that
yeah, yeah.
if you didn't have severs and like we're kind of just into sports, do you think you would have ended up finding powerlifting anyways, or do you think that was like, yeah, do you
No,
think it
I
would?
think so. I think I probably would have found it. I feel like it just really clicked for me, and I was like, I think because I'm also quite short and I have short limbs, like I'm naturally like kind of built to like have a big squat. And so I feel like I picked it up and I got good at it really quickly. So I feel like whenever you find something that sort of just clicks for you naturally, like I feel like I would have found it eventually, maybe not as early as I did, but sorry about that.
It's okay.
Just give me me a second. Um, um, but yeah, I think I would have found it, especially because of how popular it's become now. I feel like so many more people are doing it. So whether I would have just done it a bit later, but and like you said, it's never too late to start lifting. You know.
Yeah, 100%. And kind of going into some of your competitions, kind of maybe before it starts, just let everyone know what your best lifts have been.
So my best lift today, I mean, I've broken two all-time world records, both in the 148 class. So, like the first one I broke was in 2022. Um, it was raw with wraps squat of 578 pounds at 148, and then I recently broke the raw squat like in sleeves in the 148, and that was at 500 pounds. So
And
yeah, those are probably my two biggest achievements.
yeah, and for the squat, is that something that you kind of were in wraps from the beginning and kind of went to raw, or you kind of did back and forth, or how like what was your
um,
journey with that?
Actually, no. Like I spent the majority of my time lifting without anything on my knees. So like in the UK, there isn't, other than the IPF, there isn't a federation that allows you to compete in sleeves and it be considered raw. So if you put sleeves on, it's considered wraps. I think that's changed now, but like for the first few years I competed, it was like you either wore nothing or sleeves or wraps were considered the same. And like wrap lifting wasn't that big at that point. You know, like most of the competitions were just raw. So the majority of the time lifted has been with nothing. Um, and then I basically went into wraps just because at the time, like all the big pro competitions were wraps only. It's funny how like the sport changes, you know, like things
It-
come in popularity and then they change. But so I actually got into wraps because I wanted to do the Kern US Open, and I was actually I was supposed to compete at it the year that we went into lockdown. But yeah, so I put them on for that purpose. But I actually just really loved it. I feel like it's much better than wearing a sleeve.
yeah,
Um, I went back to sleeves this time just because I actually suffered like a really bad back injury. In Basically had to take time out from 2022 until I came back like last year. Um, like I did a competition, but I'd not really been training for that long. So I would say really I only got back to like my equivalent strength this year. And I started out in sleeves because I didn't want to overload my spine in wraps. So I basically been like, I mean, now I've just actually just put back wraps back on for the first time last week, and that's like I'm recovered now. Like, it's been like a 2 year journey
yeah. So
from
let's
doing
dive into
nothing
that
to
a
like
little bit, kind of
getting
what.
back into lifting to going into sleeves to like even just my off season training has like been completely different, and that's now kind of back to where it used to be. So yeah, like it's been a bit of a long journey, but so it's kind of been, I went raw with nothing, then wraps, then sleeves, and now wraps again. So
Yeah, so let's talk about that back injury that kind of was your setback, because I think it's important to talk about any elite powerlifters kind of goes through. It's almost inevitable at some point. There's going to be some sort of setback that someone goes through. So, but maybe tell us about what happened and kind of how long the journey was, and then we can kind of dive into about some of the things that you went through along the way.
yeah, so I actually originally hurt my back in like 2019, 2018. Yeah, 2019. And I basically hurt it when I was deadlifting. Like I rebounded a deadlift off the floor. And I think that like initial damage was pretty minor. Um, but it was enough that like after I did it, I literally couldn't stand up. And it took me like several days just to walk again. And at the time I did go to we call it A&E, accident and emergency. That's like your first port of call in the UK. And they did an X-ray on it, but they just sent me home with painkillers, and they was like, just don't lift. And then I basically got put on like a referral list to get an MRI and be seen by a specialist, but that actually took like 3 or 4 years to get to the point where I was getting help. So obviously in the meantime, I'd saw other specialists, and like I basically just kept getting told that I'd just caused like a little bit of disc damage, and that if I lifted heavier, I would just be in pain, but I'm not going to do anything worse. So of course, I carried on lifting,
Yeah,
thinking that I wasn't going to cause any more damage. I mean, obviously, when what we do, we put so much risk on our bodies. But yeah, basically, over the next few years, it got worse and worse and worse. And the February 2022, when I broke that all-time world record in wraps, like my training for that was pretty bizarre. I basically like could only train like every 4 or 5 days because my back would get so bad after each training session. So I was like basically doing like a competition simulation every 4 or 5 day based on recovery. And I kept saying to people like like this like specialist kept telling me I was fine. Like, I saw chiropractors, massage therapists, like you name it. I like saw everybody. And they basically it was just the same, like you're just gonna be in pain. So it kind of like gradually just became my normal. And now I look back and I'm like, I wish I'd done something sooner, but like in the moment, I just did the best I could at the time. And I was like, I wouldn't be able to lift this much if I'd really caused that much damage. Like I was breaking an all-time world record. But then after that competition, I basically just started going downhill. I competed again like a few months after that at the American Pro, and I did come fourth, but like I was in agony. Like I was just like pushing through pain all the time. And then like later that year, it started to affect just like everyday activities, and like my nervous system was completely shot. Like even just sitting down and standing back up, like my body would shake. And like everything I was doing in the gym just got dwindled down to like not very much because I just wasn't capable. So like it was just affecting me like physically day to day. At that point, I'd got some MRI images done, and I'd realized that like what probably started as like a hairline fracture originally had like basically disintegrated most of a vertebra.
Oh
The
wow.
disc above it had like bulged, like the nucleus of the disc had like bulged out, and like most of the disc was like in the space where the bone should have been. So like the disc above it also wasn't functioning. Um, so obviously at that point when I realized this, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna have to stop lifting, and that's like the minimum. Um, One of the things that made me realize actually how bad it was I went to Brian Carroll's like talk at the Swiss,
Hmm.
and that was in 2022. Yeah, it was like the end of 2022, and he like gave this talk about like the awful back injury that he had, and that he was told he'd never recover. And then he put up his MRI images on the screen, and I was like, that looks like fine. So I went to talk to him afterwards, and like the people I'd seen about it back in the UK had like made out like it wasn't even that big of a deal, and I basically just had to stop lifting and like rest, and I'd be fine. But like after seeing his talk, I was like, oh my goodness, like he made such a big deal out of it. So I went to him and I showed him my MRI images, and he was like, you need to like stop lifting now.
Yeah, and it's I feel like it's a different perspective, like, cause every time we have an injury, every doctor, every PT is like, "Just rest for 6 weeks and ice it." It's like,
Yeah,
no, we don't have the, like, mental fortitude to not lift for 6 weeks, but at the same time, like, not that we know more than a doctor, but we know that, like, that's not gonna work, so when you hear
yeah,
from someone like you said, like Brian Carroll, who's actually been through it and done it, like, you
yeah,
actually know that he knows what he's talking about in this situation.
yeah. So like I kind of connected with him then, and through Stuart McGill, and I did like a bunch of assessments, and like I showed them my images, and then like at that point I'd kind of realized like how bad it was, and I ended up having to take like 7 months out of the gym. Like I literally did nothing for 7 months. And like my recovery in that time was like I had to keep my back straight so that the bone could heal. So like even just like I couldn't drive, I couldn't walk my dogs. Like I was also like working with people in person in the gym, and I had to stop doing that because like I literally couldn't even hold like a heavy water bottle.
Oh,
Like
wow.
so I wasn't moving any place. So like it was like a long year because even when I could start doing stuff again, it was so regimented. Like even like how long I could lie for. Like I couldn't sleep a normal amount at night because if I lay for too long, that was bad. If I stood for too long, that was bad. So like everything was regimented, but like everyday stuff that was regimented. So like I've always been like a really like consistent, like hardworking, driven person, but you have to really dig deep when you have to be like regimenting how long you sit and walk and stand. And
Yeah, so let's
um
talk about the mental aspect of that, because obviously that's something that's probably difficult to go through. What are some of the things, like, mentally that kinda kept you going strong and, like, "Alright, we're gonna get back through this, we're gonna get back to the platform."
I mean, honestly, like I was told even by Stuart McGill that I'd probably never lift again. But like in my head, I was like, because he said to me, like, Brian was one in a million. Like, Brian's literally the only person that's ever recovered from that injury and got themselves out of pain, and then let alone been able to, perform. So, like, my expectations when they were never low, because in my head I was like, I'm just going to do everything that I know I can control, and I want to be able to look back and say I did everything, so like the outcome wouldn't change. So I kind of went in it with that mindset that like I've got a job to do, like I need to do everything I can in my power to. So I kind of just made myself really like focused on having the best outcome possible, and I didn't know what that was going to be, so that was like a bit scary. But my number one goal was just to get out of pain, because I think I just lived in pain for so many years that like it does actually just start to change you as a person. And I've always been like really positive, like outgoing, and I've noticed that like with time it just started to make me a lot more negative. And so like that was like my, my primary goal was just to get back to being able to do normal things, and then be able to train um, was like the next step. Being able to powerlift was like the next step after that, and then being able to powerlift at like a high level, another step again. So I like I just focused on one thing at a time. So I think no matter what goal you have, like you have to break it up into little chunks as well. So like that obviously helps mentally, because if I was only focused on competing as a pro, like that year in between where I was like going for a walk for 5 minutes. Okay, now you've done 5 minutes for 2 weeks, you can add on 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that stuff would have been way more difficult. So like I like one broke up that long term goal into like um, smaller term goals. And then I tried to look at the positive, like, okay, now I've got all this free time because I'm not in the gym like every hour of the week.
Yeah.
So like I just kind of reconnected with some family and friends, and like, I picked up some more courses so that I could, improve myself as a coach in a different way. Um, and like I picked up reading again. I'd not I read a lot as like a teenager, and I kind of like lost that when I was so focused on, competing and working. And so like I just picked up things that I hadn't, that I enjoyed outside of it. So I
Yeah.
think that's also important. And like leaning on people for that support, like even people that don't, like even family that didn't power lift, like I would just talk it through with them. Like if you got utilize the people around you, I think, for the support, and then just talk about it. Like, but I think I've always been driven. It was just having to be driven in a different way.
Yeah. And for you, what in those little steps of the journey, what do you think was the most difficult on you mentally?
The most difficult was actually when I got back into the gym, because you have no expectations about all the other stuff, like just getting like a normal routine back, and like being able to drive again and not be in pain, like be able to sleep for 9 hours and not be in pain, like that was a lot. It sounds like that would be the most difficult part, but it was actually like coming back into the gym, and then you like know what you were capable of before, so you almost have to set completely new expectations. I see that a lot of people say this, like post injury PR,
Yeah.
but like if you've been for an injury, you kind of understand that like you have to have like a whole new set of expectations. But in the back of my mind, I was always like, but before I did this, and also before I was like in agony and I still did this. But you still have to like, I think you have to just look at it as like it's like a fresh start. So like for me, I was like, okay, since I can't get back into lifting super quick, like, I started doing upper body stuff first, like push-ups and TRX rows, and eventually like I was doing like floor press with dumbbells, so I didn't squat for like the first 3 months in the gym,
Yeah.
and then I started doing like body weight squats, and then I went to like a front loaded squat, but like it took months just to get back to doing a back squat.
Yeah. And how
Um,
nerve wracking was it kind of getting back under the bar for the first time? Or do you think you did?
Actually, not so scary. I will say, like I prepped for a competition, and I was like only training twice a week. So we actually moved to Elite FTS in like the winter of 2023, and I was like still in early stages of being back in the gym. So like I moved to be at the FGS, and then I was like surrounded by everyone lifting loads, and I was like still doing rehab work, and like I just started lifting again, and I set myself a goal of competing like 4 months later, which everybody said was too early, but I like set my expectations accordingly. Like I knew I wouldn't be like back to my best, obviously, and I was only training twice a week. But as I got closer to that and the weight started to get heavier, that was hard. like mentally putting heavy weight on my back again was like I would feel stressed about having to do that session like
Yeah.
for a whole day before I did it. Um, and like even this year when I was prepping for the pro am, like as it got really heavy, I started getting scared again. And like I remember like pre-injury, like I was fearless. I literally never got scared. And I think that's actually a really important part of being your best as a powerlifter because if you have even like an inkling of fear, that you're going to hold back a little bit and actually then you're more unsafe. So
Yeah.
you can remind yourself of that, but like actually putting that into practice is like a totally different thing. So like I'm still honestly still working on that. Like I still get a bit of fear when it's heavy and it's only really with squat just because the weight is like on my back.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that, like, any lifter I remember when I did the episode with Travis Rogers, like, one of the things he said, like, he's been through God knows how many injuries.
Yeah.
He's like, "I am
Yeah.
always scared to get under a bar now," and it's like, once you go through that sort of trauma, like, it's totally understandable, and you're so right in the fact that, like, if you can walk up to a bar, fear and confidence are very, like, polarizing in that aspect of, like, if you're walking up
Yeah.
to a bar and have 0 fear, you just have confidence to hit it, you're way more likely to hit it. And then it kind of dives into the aspect of like when you have like a crew and like spotters and like or the people
Yes.
you know you're
Yeah.
training with. It's like it's the same kind of thing of like the level of confidence at which you can approach the bar is the more likelihood that you're actually going to hit the weight.
Yeah. I mean, I was always someone that like prioritized safety, even if I'm like not doing a heavy session. Like you should always be in a position where like you can be saved. So like we in our gym back home, we had a monolith made with safety pins because our crew wasn't big enough. And so like I always knew that like I would set the safety pins, like I would be safe if I needed to be. But actually then just having people around you that you can trust is really important. So like I moved and was around new people when I was prepping for that first competition. So I think that played a factor of like, I know you, but I don't know you super well. And like, although there are other athletes at Elite FTS, like, they're going to be good, but like, you have to like, you're trusting them with your life.
Yeah, and like you
And like,
obviously with you training there, like you see there's multiple equipped lifters there, and like you understand that that aspect of it is a whole different level of like
oh yeah,
safety because it can
because
go
this,
wrong so fast.
yeah, like it's a whole another level. But yeah, like I'm, very fortunate to be around people that truly get it. And like I know now when I'm lifting that like I'm safe. I mean, I use safety straps anyway because I think, like I said, I think it's important to have that like level of safety when you're doing like heavy stuff. But like I will make sure I have at least 3 spotters and like I know they're people I can truly trust and they really get it. So yeah, like yeah,
But
I'm lucky.
yeah, and speaking of lead FTS, obviously you're very well involved with them, and so let's talk about how you kind of develop that relationship and maybe some of the not necessarily training stories, but kind of what's it been like being a part of that.
Honestly, like the first time I walked in the building, it was pretty overwhelming. Like even as like at the time, like I was a very good powerlifter and I was like at the top of my game, and there's still like a bit of a pinch me moment the first time I walked in there, and like I'd already spoken to Dave online, but like I'd never met him in person, so that was like obviously like a really cool moment. But he's just such a genuinely like good person, like I guess we put people up on pedestals in the industry that you sort of look up to, but then like you realize that he's just like a normal person, but he's just like he's giving back a lot to the industry and
100%.
he's giving back to a lot of lifters. And yeah, so like the first time me and Tom came over for a podcast, it was just like really good to like meet everybody, and it kind of emphasizes what they're doing even more because you see the people behind it and like how they really just want to help people. And like we just really loved that. Like, we wanted to give back too. So like over like that like few months, like first podcast I did was like 3 years ago. So it's like July 2022. And like over the course of the rest of that year, like we came over a few times and like filmed some content for them, and like we did a couple of different podcasts, and then we came to help with the Swiss symposium because that was like the first year they did it. They just did it for 2 years, but yeah, so like you like want to give back because you're giving back to like the machine that helps so many people.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then obviously like everybody that you meet there is just like you feel like kindred souls. Like we're all in this together. Like we're like a group of like misfits from all over the place, but like we all have this one thing in common of that like the gym and like lifting and the iron is like almost like therapy. Um, so I feel like even like, you know, friends and family that don't do it, they get it, but they don't really get it. And
Yeah.
then you meet people and they basically become your family through lifting because you have that thing in common. And obviously, like at Elite FTS, everybody's just like, you know, that extra level of like wanting to help people. And so, yeah, I just feel like it kind of felt like a bit of a home. Um, so we just kept coming back. And then at one point, Dave was like, "Do you have to leave? Can you just stay?" And I was like, "Well, it doesn't really work like that. You know, like you have to have like a specific visa." So we kind of like looked into that, and I realized that I could get a visa through powerlifting because I was coming over to compete so much anyway. And since I already had a sponsorship with Elite FTS, like as an athlete, on an athlete visa, you have to have like a sponsor backing you. Um, and so like me and Tom just worked something out with Dave where like being backed as a sponsorship, there would be things that I would do in return. So like we do a lot of different stuff for them now. Like I run the social media, like we do a lot of educational content. Tom does a lot of co-hosting on the podcast. We run events with them. Like Tom runs Train Your Ass Off with Dave. So like we're doing a lot for them, but like in return, they gave us the opportunity to come over here. So yeah, and like it's a good thing for both of our careers because we're both coaches, and honestly, just like it's been a really good opportunity to meet so many different people.
Yeah. And
So
as far
I'm
as
like
the,
totally babbling, but I just, you know, it's made such a big difference in our lives, and like just the ethos of Elite FTS is just like something we both totally stand for. So yeah, like you live, learn, pass on, you know.
yeah, and as far as the back injury goes and kind of with what you do with coaching, kind of helping others, what are some of the maybe lessons or takeaways that you got from that injury that's helped you with others?
Um, One, like pain can change your outlook on everything. And so just like being understanding of anyone that's going through something. Two, I think like also you never really know what's going on with someone unless you really speak to them because it's not like, I mean, there are people that like put everything out online, but like they don't really, you know, you never know the whole story.
Yeah.
Um, and then like three, like you are capable of like overcoming any adversity if you like really put the effort in. Like I was told by so many people that I would never come back from my injury, but like yeah, and I think it's also just like being able to encourage people to like stay positive and like find ways to get through, you know, like the things I listed, like goal setting, like we do that anyways, powerlifters, but you're just doing it in a different way. Um, yeah, I think I mean I yeah, like I've worked with a lot of rehab patients pre my own injury. So I kind of had a lot of experience anyway with seeing clients go through difficult things, but I think it's probably softened me a little bit.
Yeah, and
So
I think it's like you said, not necessarily on the flip side of like coming back from an injury, but I feel like we do see a lot of people coming back from injuries, like trying to come back almost too quick. So,
yeah.
for you,
Oh yeah.
what is this? Some of the things, or not necessarily like markers or like kind of progress points, but kind of getting someone to be in that right mindset and timeline. Like, what's been some of the things that's helped you kind of help them with those timelines?
Yeah. Um, I think one thing is just remembering that there will always be competitions to do. Like people think that if they stop, like this, like it's gonna go away or something. But it's not. Like there are always going to be competitions there for you to do. Um, I mean, the other thing is like look at the long haul. Like where do you want to be in like 30, 40 years? Like, do you want to be moving well? Do you like want to be chasing your kids, your grandkids around? Like, well, your grandkids obviously in that amount of time frame, but like, you know, like, do you still want to be active and fit? Like, so you've got to really look after yourself. I think this is something that comes with just like getting older. Like in my 30s, I'm like way more like aware of like growing old. And like in my 20s, I just was like living life, didn't care. But like I think growing older and also going through injury kind of makes you just a bit more aware of like your body in the long haul, and actually like you need to look after it because it's the only one you get. And so like what's like 6 months now versus the rest of your life? Like if you really gave the time to like allow your body to heal and fully recover, then you're not going to have any problems with that issue later down the line,
Yeah,
you
and one
know?
of the things that, like, my friend just had surgery and, like, obviously is, like, a top level powerlifter, and is, like, he's wanting to get back and, like, obviously going through that, like, mental ringer, and, like, one of the things that I've really learned through this podcast and talking to these people that have gone through injuries and people that are in their 30s and their 40s that are still lifting is, like, the weights aren't going anywhere. There's absolutely no reason to
Yeah.
rush. The only thing rushing back to a meet is gonna do is shorten your career and shorten your, like,
Yes.
livelihood.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that something to remember is that, because I think a lot of people think that it's like going back to square one, but it's not, because like you know so much more now. You know what works for you in training, like you know what works for your recovery. Like coming back is not starting over,
Yeah.
because your body also remembers. Like even though I didn't live for 7 months, like I didn't lose all my muscle. Like I lost some, obviously, but like even that, when I got back into training, like that came back way quicker than I had when I, the first time I grew it. So like muscle memory, like your body remembers. And I almost see it as like an opportunity to like, I was never a perfect lifter before. Like there were definitely things I could do. So here's a great opportunity to start from the ground up and actually fix those technical issues. So I would see it as like a way of like you're rebuilding, but you're going to rebuild stronger. And so like you don't need to rush to do that. In fact, doing it at like a steady pace is going to work way better.
Yeah, and
I mean,
it's
there's a reason why quotes exist, like, the tortoise is going to win the race over the rabbit, because, slow and steady wins the race, because you're going to do it properly. You're going to do it safely. You're going to build that really solid foundation. Um, yeah, and I think you have to just look at other people, like look for support from other people who have had similar injuries. Like I definitely found like solace in being able to speak to Brian, because it was never like like recovery is never just like consistent. Like you're not just getting better. Like it's like with your lifting journey, it's not like it's got pitfalls. And so I think recovery from injury is the same. Like so being able to speak to other people who have been through that injury, I think is really valuable. Um, and there's always going to be someone that's had some sort of similar injury, you know. So yeah,
yeah.
like looking for support from others, I think.
Yeah, and the mindset of which you approach it too is like how you look at it. You can create it as a negative or a positive, depending. Like instead of like, oh, it's going to take me a year to get back to squatting. It's like, oh, I have a year
Mm.
now to make my squat look perfect. There's just like so many different
Exactly.
ways you can kind of flip the script, and it's kind of like if you're going to remodel your house, you'll still have the foundation there. You don't need to worry about
Yeah.
building a new foundation. You've done that for years before. You have a new opportunity to perfect things that you didn't worry about
Yeah.
before because you were too focused on the next PR.
Yeah. I think, yeah, being patient's important. Like for me, when I kind of was getting back to lifting, like I was like, my body was just like all over the place. I was like twisting, and you have to just focus on what's in front of you and like what you can control, and not be too focused on like the long term goal. Because eventually you'll get there and be able to look back and be like, okay. But yeah, and you definitely don't want any major setbacks with injury and recovery from surgery or, whatever. So yeah, like it's probably better for it to take a little bit longer than have the risk of like having to take a really big step back.
Yeah, and so what was your first meet back from back on the platform from that spinal injury?
So I actually had entered the Ghost Clash. It was like a big pro meet, um, and I didn't want to pull out, but I knew I was basically going to it to come last. But my goal was just to like basically clear the pro dot score.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I'd not deadlifted from the floor before I went, other than like 2 weeks out, because I'd brought deadlifts back in from a block. Um, so like I was like, I might not be able to deadlift from the floor, but I was like, I know I could go out there and deadlift something super light if I had to. Just and I also wanted to test, can I do all three lifts in one day
Mhm.
and not cause any back pain? So like I knew I wasn't going to be at my peak, but like I also just wanted to get back on platform and be in that environment, because every competition you do is good experience. Like you're going to learn something from it, even if you're not at your absolute best. So like I just wanted to kind of get back into that environment. So it was like I stopped lifting like late 2022, and then the first competition I did was like April 2024. Yeah. So
So, like, since you've
um,
been on back on the platform, have you kind of still been dealing with any lingering issues, or is it kind of something that you think you took like the right timeline and kind of got through it?
I mean, luckily, touch wood, like I've literally had no back pain in over a year. So I still had a little bit when I did that first competition, but it was minor. And I've literally had no back pain like since.
Yeah, and
So
do you still
I
have to do like a lot of rehab and stuff before, or is that something that you're kind of just into like I guess a quote unquote normal routine of like warming up and things like that?
I mean, I feel like I learned a lot along my journey anyway about like mobility and like I originally injured my back in 2018, 2019. So it was, I've learned a lot about back injuries since then. But one thing I definitely have done different is like more core specific work.
Okay.
Like you work your core in pretty much everything you do, but like that was something that I wasn't doing as much as, and more mobility. Like, but I keep that stuff up whether I need it or not because it's still important. Um, and then like I'm just good at listening to my body. I think like you learn what works for you and what doesn't. So like I know when to back off when something doesn't feel right. Like I'm not going to push through. Um, and I think you can still be capable of achieving your best whilst also being sensible.
Yeah. So where do you think lifters kind of miss the mark? Lifters that haven't experienced like a setback like that. Where do you think they miss the mark in being proactive rather than reactive?
I definitely know that like a lot of powerlifters like miss out on mobility. And so I think a lot of injuries stem from, we spend a lot of time like pushing, as you see a lot of people with like internally rotated shoulders. So there are a lot of shoulder injuries in powerlifting. Um, People are like, you hear people saying like they're in pain for something, but then they're not proactively doing something about it until it gets to the point where they have to stop doing something. And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh no. So like if you have even like a minor issue, like listen to it straight away and do something about it. But I think generally powerlifters don't do enough mobility work. Um,
Yeah, I think we all
I don't know
know
what,
we all
I don't know
have
what you
those.
think, but
Yeah, we all have
it's not
those
something.
lifter friends that are like, "All right, I'm here." Then they just get under the bar, and it's like, "What are you doing?" Like, it might be fine for now, but in a few years, it's not. You're not going to be able to
Yeah,
do that, and that's why, like, for me, I'm obviously still like relatively young and like in the sport, newer, and like I'm still proactive about it. Like, I spend a good 15 minutes before like doing my mobility and things. Like, I've
yeah,
had small injuries here and there, no like major setbacks, knock on wood, yet, but I think when you see like there's like a fine line between like you see like I said the people that'll just walk up right under the bar and start squatting versus some people spend like an hour before, and it's like you need to kind of find that happy medium of be
yeah.
efficient, get the things that you need done, but don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, I think a bit more focus on longevity because you can be in this sport for a long time if you do it right. And then I think the other thing is just technique. Like you said, a lot of people just like lift pretty thoughtlessly. Like actually being aware of like what muscles you're using and how it should feel and like implementing that pretty early on is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that's obviously the gear, like being in equipped, like the gear is kind of protecting your joints and things like that. But I think that aspect, that technical aspect of it allows people to lift longer because they're putting their bodies in positions that are not necessarily safe, but like I think you know what I'm trying to say here. Like
Yeah.
they're gonna last longer because they're not just like, all right, we're just gonna squat this or we're just gonna bench this. Like you have to do everything right or it's gonna go horribly wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, you can ask some of the top. I've asked some like big squatters like what they think about when they squat and they just say, "Yeah, just squat. Just go down and get back up."
Yeah.
But like that generally is not going to work for everyone. That's like the very small minority, you know.
Yeah, and
Um,
so with kind of being at Elite FTS, obviously Dave being an equipped lifter and many lifters there, have you ever considered putting on some gear?
I've played a little bit in like briefs. I love training in a slingshot, which is not a shirt, but Dave has been trying to convince me recently. But he knows that like there are things I want to achieve raw. But he said to me the other day, "Well, now you've got both the all-time world records, raw and wraps. Maybe you should think about putting on a single ply
Yeah.
and then multiply." He was like, "You're trying to get all of them."
Yeah, and like
Um,
obviously I have like a bias like now that I do multiply, but at the same time, like just being someone who's like loves the sport of powerlifting, I think um, every lifter should be able to experience the whole circle of it at some point. I think it
Yeah, I
you get
think
to learn
so.
a lot from both sides. You get to maybe you'll have more fun doing this. Like there's probably thousands, not thousands, but several people that have gone and tried multiply and they're like, I hate this shit. I'm going back to raw. But like at
Yeah,
least they gave it a shot.
yeah. I definitely think it's definitely something I'm gonna do at some point. I just think there are such big differences between the way you do lifts as a raw lifter versus an
Oh,
equipped lifter.
100%.
Like they definitely complement each other. I've used briefs to kind of like overload and like, bring up, weaknesses that I had. And so I definitely think there's like a place where they complement each other. But like, I know myself and that like when I do something, I have to like do it full force. So yeah, like I've got like a little bit more left that I want to do with raw lifting. And then my plan is to jump in and have a go.
Yeah, so as far
So
as those goals, I know you're trying to break your own squat record again, maybe at a lighter body weight. So, I don't know if you have a meet picked out for that, but like kind of tell us about what your plan of attack for that is.
yeah, so I'm actually my next meet. I'm signed up for the Shack Showdown at the end of November, and it's going to be my first meet back in reps, like post back injury. So, um, yeah, like my goal is to just try and beat the numbers I've done before. So I feel like that's setting a big goal already, um, especially after coming back from a back injury. Like I had a really good prep. I just did the Cincinnati Women's Pro Am,
Yep.
and that was just such a fun competition. And it was like I felt like, okay, I'm really pushing myself now, and I'm like I'm at my peak again. So now I just want to do that, but like in wraps.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how's your approach in terms of training? Like, is it more reserved than maybe previously, or is it something that like you kind of ramp it up here and there, or just like what overall like how's that intensity look?
So actually, like my training is kind of back similar to what I used to do. I spend a lot of the like off season um, doing a lot more like power work, bodybuilding work. So like for example, the last month, I've basically most of my training has come from the sled. I do like one skill day a week to keep the lifts in, but like like I'm using like hanging band weight. So it like there's a big stability aspect and that's going to limit the weight. So like my goal always is like when I'm not near a competition, lower spinal loading, limit the weight, but keep the movement in there and then get, improvements from other aspects of training. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't do, but this is something I've always done. Like I utilize different modes of training, bodybuilding to bring up size in muscles that need to be brought up, power work because that's going to be really beneficial, and then even just like a lot more cardiovascular work because you need your fitness high so that like as you get closer to competition, like you can handle more.
Yeah.
You're not like having to rest 15 minutes between heavy reps. Um, so like yeah, like I've been doing a lot more cardiovascular training, and um, yeah, so I feel like it's not very traditional powerlifting. And I only really like get really into the powerlifts when I'm like 12 to 15 weeks out from a meet. So I spend the majority of the year like training in different ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when you're in that off season, you're not necessarily training that big three in the same way. What kind of um not necessarily your inspiration, but how did you come to that conclusion? Like that's what worked for you?
Uh, well, one, from a longevity standpoint, like you want to look after your body. Um, Two, like because I want to be able to lift like heavy for a long time. So if you're doing it all the time, you're just more at risk of injury. I think it's more so as like a raw lifter because you don't have that like support from the gear.
Yeah.
Um, but then like I mean, you want to be like training like an athlete, so it's going to be more than just doing those three powerlifts. Obviously, like everything is geared towards improving those and being as strong as possible. But like you want to be fast, you want to be lean, strong, like this was going to have a big benefit for as you get closer to competition for those big three, and then also just like keeping your mobility up. You know, um, yeah, I know like you get good at what you do, but if you look at any sport, they don't just do the one thing that they're doing. Like they're doing all these other things to complement it. So like a lot of athletes, even like on the football field, they're in the weights room, like doing stuff that's going to complement that. So like we're already in the weights room, so like there are other things in the weights room that we could do to complement the power lifts and get us, get yourself stronger.
Yeah, and as far as using these different styles of training, what do you find to be maybe not like your least favorite, but like the most difficult for you?
Um, that's tough because I like having variety. So I think that's also like why I always train different because it keeps me motivated when I'm like good at like lots of different things. I don't know. I think I probably actually struggle with most when it gets really heavy. But I don't know if that's just because it's like post injury,
Hmm.
which is actually the thing I need to be like the most excited about because I compete in it. But I think that will come back with time.
Yeah, I
I'll enjoy it
yeah,
more.
and I think to be honest, like for most powerlifters, the hardest part of like everything is the recovery and the eating. Like the training part is easy for everyone because like that's what we
Yeah,
like to
actually, yeah,
do, and
that's a
it's
good point.
like for me, like I suck at eating, and I'm trying to gain weight, and it's like that's my biggest struggle. Like I got sleep down, I got hydration down. Training, like I said, is the easy thing, but for me, like my biggest struggle in powerlifting is eating enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're treating yourself like an athlete. So like if you want to be your best, like you're realizing that there's so much more than just like what you're doing in that like 2 to 3 hours in the gym multiple times a week. Like you're basically you're like preparing yourself every hour of the day. So even just not sitting too long sounds really not good for you.
Yeah, and I feel like we often see a lot of these powerlifters, like, someone told me it's like majoring in the minors, like they're getting 4 hours of sleep a night and they're barely hydrating, but they're worrying about getting this new peptide or something like that. Like they're just
Oh
worrying
yeah.
about, or they're worrying about like, oh, what am I going to hit at this meet? But like they're not focusing on the basics that are going to bring you to that level higher than anything else will.
Yeah, and that stuff's so easy. I feel like there's like a hierarchy of like things that are important,
Yeah,
and like sleep and nutrition are like up there. And then like what program are you doing? Like your intent in the gym, like in the training. What's your recovery look like? Are you actually getting a certain like number of steps every day? Because like movement is key to just like overall health. Um, I feel like the stuff that comes after that, like supplementation, PEDs, like that's all like
that's like at the top.
the
Like if you
last
that
thing you should be
triangle, like
thinking.
that's at the top of that triangle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like all that other stuff is just gonna make such a bigger impact. But yeah, I feel like I've had that stuff I've not really struggled with so much more recently because I've been doing this for 12 years and I feel like I've nutrition is just like yeah, like I basically just treat myself like an athlete. If you want to
100%.
be considered like one, like yeah,
And so obviously the meet in November, like it's kind of getting to that point where we're going to start kind of entering prep and kind of prepping your body for that. So as far as the approach for that, how do you um like briefly kind of explain how you kind of peak for a meet?
So I actually will start meet prep like next week, which I've done like a couple of longer meet preps. Like when I was like at my peak, I would do like a 6 to 7 week meet prep. Like I wouldn't take long. But now like because I've kind of I'm like not really like back to my absolute best. Like I mean I guess I am now, but like I've done slightly longer meet preps where I've like because I've took the lifts out a bit more in off season. Like I want to bring them back in and start with like a higher volume. So I will do like slow eccentrics, pauses, hanging bands, um, and I'll do those with like higher volume for like the first few weeks, and then as the volume comes down and the weight's going up, it's only really like the last 6 weeks, 6 7 weeks that I'll do like the traditional power lifts. Um, yeah, so like I find ways to like basically gradually bring the weight up on them. Um, One, just so your body can get used to that too. Like I said, I've not really done any heavy lifting for a few months since I last competed, so and I will keep like volume high. I will keep cardiovascular work high, and like that will taper down as I get closer as well. And so basically, like your recovery demand is going to be so much higher in the first few weeks, and then like as you get closer, that recovery demand is going to go to the heavy lifts and recovering from those. So it's like starts off like woo, and then you basically dwindle down. Like the variety of what I'm doing becomes a lot less. Um, Obviously the weight goes up, but like the number of reps I'm doing like comes down. Um, yeah, so I think it's important to do like for me, it's always been important to be doing like a lot more cardiovascular work and stuff still in the early stages, and then that like basically disappears as I get closer. Um,
Yeah, and I've
yeah.
actually found that, like, and I feel like it's not even talked about much, but like the first like 4 to 6 weeks of a prep is way harder than the last like 3 weeks.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because you're just like, like I even time all my rests. So like I stop doing that like when I'm doing much heavier work. But I still have like a rough idea. And like as I get much closer, I try to simulate like the competition itself. So I will take like 10 minutes between attempts. But like I only do that right near the end. Um, but yeah, like obviously that's what you do in competition. So
Yeah,
like I start really far away from how we do it in competition and get closer and closer to the end. Um, but yeah, like at that point, my recovery should still like I feel pretty bad, but like my recovery should be at its best because of all the prep work that I've done in advance.
yeah, and for me, it's like I'm almost at a point, and at least my career right now, where it's like I like a shorter prep, and I like almost like literally the less I do, the better my total's gonna be, and it's just
Yeah,
funny to see like like you said, like some people take like a 16-week prep. Like I'd rather do like a 4 to 6
yeah,
week prep because to me it
yeah.
just
Like in the in the past, I would do like 6, 7 weeks. Like that would be more than enough. And I think after this competition, that will be what I'll be doing again. So I think it just depends where you are and like what your starting point is. Like I said, I've basically spent the last month doing like lots of sled work. And like you can use sled work for all sorts, but I've been using it for like strength and hypertrophy, and I've done like a lot more like dumbbell work, and so I'm like further away from the lifts right now. So like that's why my prep's looking a bit longer. But in reality, the actual like competition style practice doesn't happen until like the last 6, 7 weeks.
yeah, and it's like
So like I won't use a straight bar for squat until that point. Like I will use other implements like bow bar, SS yoke, like cambered bar. I will only use like the competition style, like as I've gotten like that 6, 7 weeks.
yeah, and for people that kind of train like strict, like you obviously mix in different things like bodybuilding, you said like cardio and things like that, but
Mhm.
for people that only do like powerlifting year round, it's almost like when do you consider it prep? If you're still doing the big 3 all year,
No, that's
like,
true.
obviously, you're gonna, like, ramp up the intensity and stuff, but, like, at what point is it just off-season training versus you're actually prepping? Like, just is it the day you sign
Yeah.
up for the meet? Is it do you set it 8 weeks out? Is it after you do a deload? Like, it's an interesting approach.
I will say, like, as you get closer to your own ceiling, like when I first started out powerlifting, my training was a lot more powerlifting all year round as a beginner. And I think like as an intermediate, that can kind of still be the case. But like as you become like an advanced lifter and you're getting close to your own ceiling, you actually taking a step away from the powerlifts becomes like a really important factor to being your best because like my one rep max versus like it doesn't matter about like the actual weight on the bar, but like my one rep max now versus my like one rep max when I was a beginner, like the amount of stress that that's going to cause on my body as an advanced lifter versus beginner is so different. So like you almost need a bigger gap between that sheer stress versus like my one rep max when I was like 2 years into lifting because it's not the same. Like although it's still a one rep max, like the amount of like stress going through my body now is like way higher. So I think like as you become better with time, you actually need to have different, it becomes even more important to have like different modalities of training style. Um, so like I think you just end up doing that as like you become much stronger.
Yeah, and even through, like, the lens of a prep, like, on, like, a micro scale, if you look at, like, if you're taking, like, a heavy single towards the beginning of prep of, like, almost like a baseline, like, I
Yeah.
guess a good
10 where
example
you're
is,
at.
like, John Hack, like, at the beginning of his prep, he'll pull 840, it'll be an RP 10, but then he pulls
Yeah.
940 on the platform, like, that
Yeah.
kinda ramping up of, like, yeah, they were both RP 10s, but it's 100 more pounds, it's more sheer weight, it's
Yeah.
more stress
Well,
on the
that's like a
body.
good example of like peaking working really well.
Exactly.
Like I couldn't do a super heavy squat during my off season. Like, like it would be a big difference.
Yeah.
So like that just shows like he knows how to truly peak his performance. And that's what you want to do because that's going to help you last a lot longer and live for a lot longer.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the younger lifters are like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be strong enough for this meet." It's like, "No, you didn't prepare your body for this meet yet." Like, if you peak
Yeah.
correctly, you're gonna add 50, 60, 100 pounds to whatever you just did last week.
It is funny to think though, because people are like, "Oh, you're so strong," and you're like, "Well, I am, but I'm not strong like this all year round.
Yeah.
I just beat myself to be this strong," you know?
Yeah, but I think we can kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final
Yeah.
question. If you could give a new lifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would you tell them?
I mean, beyond just like I think people don't start competing straight away. Like, like I always get people saying to me, like, "I'm not ready."
Yeah,
Like, you're always ready. Like anyone can compete. Like actually just find out if you actually enjoy it first. So, like just go do a meet. So I would say like one, I mean, like beyond just like having a good time, like you're gonna meet so many amazing people. So like just say hello to everybody. Like you're all there for like, you might be different people from different backgrounds, but you've got that one thing in common. So like I think the best thing about powerlifting for me is all the people I've met through doing
100%.
it. So like go in with an open mind, like chat to everybody in your flight that you're warming up with, like warm up with other people. Like every meet I go to, like I can go in there and like maybe I only know one or two people, but by the end I've like chatted to everybody. So I think yeah, that's like my one piece of advice is like meet people and make so many friends.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.